This is years later. This is 15, 20 years later. And we're watching this movie, the Mothman Prophecies. And there's a scene where Richard Gere's in his hotel room and he gets a phone call through his motel phone. And the voice says, "Hello, we will see you in time." And I flipped out, and my son is like, "Dad, what's the matter?" And I said, "Holy shit. I told that guy, I told John Keel that line 25 years ago."
But doing all this media started to get Woody in trouble. He did one TV interview that allowed regular people to call in.
No, it's a mistake.
I agree. A caller named Tom said that he too knew Ingrid Cold, and he had went to Lanulus. Woody asked Tom to describe what he saw to see if he was telling the truth. Tom gave Woody a bunch of details about the planet. Woody confirmed on TV that Tom was telling the truth. Woody even talks about this in his book. What Woody doesn't mention is that Tom was actually a college kid pranking him. Tom was actually Thomas F. Monteleone, who went on to become a well-known science fiction writer. And later on, Monteleone actually admitted to this. He even said he regretted it because of all the negative attention it brought.
Welcome back. I'm here with Tom Monteleone. Tom, welcome.
Hey, man, thank you. And you pronounced my name right. Beautiful.
I had to go slowly, but I think we've already been talking for over 2 hours, and now we're just recording our stuff, and all the other stuff we probably couldn't record online, but at least safely on Google. But one of the reasons I've had you on the show is I've known you for a very brief period of time, maybe like a year or so. This is actually the first time we sat down and talked virtually, never in person.
Yeah.
But I was reading Operation Trojan Horse from John Keel, and on page 202, I see your name in the book. I'm like, I know this guy. Like, what the heck? Why the heck is that there? And, you know, in this episode, I'm going to put it on the screen so people can actually see I'm not making it up. And you were also on the Y-Files. You were mentioned in the episode on Lanulus or Lanulus.
Lanulus. Yeah. A bullshit planet, by the way.
I don't know. Ingrid Cold, people are going to be really upset about that. But we're going to talk about that. We're definitely going to talk about that. So
yeah,
on this channel, I interview all sides of this argument. And you're not really on a side, but you're an aspect that of the quote-unquote phenomenon that people don't like to talk about because people don't like to be made fools, right? But it's still important to know that there are some people out there who do hoaxes, especially
for whatever reason. I mean, there's different reasons.
Right. And you're a self-professed, former hoaxer, and you did it when you were young we can talk about whatever the reasons were, but I think it's still interesting. And you even fooled, not forever, but for some period of time, the great John Keel. And by the way, in Operation Trojan Horse, he was not fooled at that point. I don't even know why he was talking about you, other than a hoax.
He also mentioned me in his book, The Mothman Prophecies.
And also in the movie, there is a line there, but we'll get to that. You have to tell that part of the story.
Yeah.
Okay, so really briefly, tell us a little bit about just your background, what you've been doing for the last several decades, and all that good stuff.
Well, several decades really doesn't kind of cover it. I'm a 78-year-old guy now, so I've been writing professional fiction for more than 50 years, and I've published more than 50 books, more than 100 short stories, maybe another 100 articles and columns. So, I've been busy. Most people have writers have a vanity shelf, or, I have a vanity wall. I got a whole wall of shit that I published.
Yeah, my vanity shelf is right over there. But anyway,
I got a freaking wall, and I've had interesting life. I've interacted with lots of characters over time. And something that happened to me when I was still a college student is what we're talking about tonight. I was listening to a radio show one night where there was a guy.
Yeah, I was about to say, how did this start? Like, what was the trigger?
We were studying for exams, all my roommates and we listened to an FM radio station that played jazz. But at 11 o'clock, the jazz hours stopped, and they had this talk show for like another hour. And my roommate didn't turn it off because they said, tonight we're speaking with Woodrow Derenberger. They used to call them contactees if you had met aliens. A contactee who claims to have been from the planet Lanulus, and that was the fadeaway. And my roommate said, hey, man, we to this guy, Woody Derenberger, who was a sewing machine repairman from West Virginia. So not a Mensa candidate by any stretch, but he had a story to tell. So we're listening, and after about 20 minutes of him telling his experiences meeting these aliens that landed their ship on a highway, you could call in. So one of my roommates said, hey, they used to call me Mont. They said, hey, Mont, why don't you go call and see what you can say? I said, okay. So I go in the back room. It was landlines back then, back in when dinosaurs ruled the earth. And I called in. They put me on hold. And the producer comes on. He says, so what do you want to say do you have a question for our guest? And I said, no, I don't have a question for my guest. I just want to tell him that I know what he's saying about his trip to the planet Lanulus. I know it's true. And the guy says, oh, yeah? How do you know that? And I said, because I've been there too.
When the United States and China clash, the world will never be the same, especially when forces beyond reality threaten to intervene. What if the United States went to war with the People's Republic of China? How would these rivals fight for supremacy on land, sea, air, and across the stochastic streams of time? What wonder weapons would be unleashed? What horrors would emerge from the irradiated sludge of the South China Sea? What heroes would rise and forever change the course of history? Tread into the deepest and darkest dimensions of the multiverse, gaze through a kaleidoscope of fractured realities, and bear witness to the disturbing visions of World War III from today's greatest minds in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Weird World War, China. Available now from Baen Books at Baen.com.
And the guy flips out and he says, okay, you're in a queue, but we're going to move you to the front.
So what were you feeling? What were you feeling when they said that? Did you have nervousness
I'm thinking, oh God. Well, you know what? I was always kind of this theatrical guy. I'd done a lot of theater in high school, and I always had fun with this kind of stuff. So, I'm thinking, oh, great. I'm going to be on the air. I'm going to fuck with this guy. I'm going to see, what he's saying is either true or not true. So they bumped me up. They put me on the air. And it was like on a 5-second delay. So I'm in one of the back bedrooms in our apartment. And everything I would say, 5 seconds later, I'd hear my roommates out in the living room crack up. They start laughing, right? But because, it was on a delay. And because you weren't, they didn't want you to call in and say, yeah, I heard you, and I think you're all fucked. They didn't want you saying that kind of stuff, right? So I get on the air and I said, yeah, I just want to let people in the audience know that Woody's telling the truth. I mean, there is a planet Lanulus, and I've met some of the people that pilot their starships, and they actually took me to their planet. And the narrator, the commentator, the guy that ran the show, that he's like, oh my God, this has never happened in the history of my show. And he said, they started asking me questions, which I had heard a lot of the stuff Woody had said, and my plan was to essentially contradict him and say whatever he said he saw there, I was going to say, I'm not sure I saw the same thing you did, or I saw something totally different. And he was incredibly facile. He fielded my questions like a Dominican shortstop, and he would, throw me out at first base. He was like, he had an answer for every time I'd, contradict him, basically. And I had
So
a lot
what were
of fun
the
with
aspects of what were the aspects of Lanulus that were particularly ridiculous before you even got started?
Well, the original thing he said is that Lanulus was located in the galaxy of Ganymede. Well, Ganymede
That's
is a
Jupiter's
planet
moons.
in our. It's one of our
Yeah.
moons. It's not a galaxy. It's not even out of our solar system. So Woody probably pulled Ganymede out of his butt. Okay, and I thought, I have a working knowledge of basic astronomy, and Ganymede's not a galaxy, for one thing. you know. But then he said that they didn't build, their planet was so big that they didn't need to build high structures. Nothing was higher than 2 or 3 stories high. And I said, yeah, I noticed that, Woody, but when I was there, when they took me there, I noticed there were these big, tall, black towers that kind of surrounded all their cities. And he said, oh, yeah, the towers, yeah. The tower. They used to use those as a defensive fortress of force fields when they had wars, but they don't have wars anymore. So now they use those towers to control the weather. Yeah, that's it. Right.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
He was really pretty good, right? but I'm catching him in the story, and I'm thinking, God, this is a lot of fun. So I was only there for about 15 minutes, and they finally blew me off. But then they were able to, because it was a landline, the producers were able to call me back. And they called me back, and they said, oh, I told them my name was Ed Bailey. I didn't even give my real name. I gave him a fake name. And they said, is Ed there? And I said, who is this? And they said, well, this is the producer. Woody's agent would like to speak with you. I said, Woody has an agent? This guy comes on the line. His name was Harold Salkin. And he said, we were to meet with you. We were absolutely fascinated because this is something that we didn't anticipate. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'll bet you were. Yeah, you weren't anticipating, sure. So I gave him my info, and I didn't think anything more about it. About 2 weeks later, I get a call from Harold Salkin, and Woody's in to meet with you, at your apartment. And I'm thinking, right? It's like, this is starting to get out of hand. Well, Sean, it got way, way out of hand. But that's how it started. If you want to intervene here, whatever. I'm going to have a little sip of my cocktail.
Yeah. Okay. So this agent calls you, and they want to come to your apartment, or at least
Yeah.
They want to come to your apartment and meet you.
Yeah.
So what happens? What do you say?
I'm thinking, do you guys know that I'm full of bullshit, or do you believe me? Afraid that I'm revealing his story? I was confounded, and my roommates, were all saying, "Oh, you gotta let this guy come over. Come on, see what about." And they said they all promised to hide in the back bedrooms, while this all went on. And I was afraid they'd start laughing, break up in the back. It's like, we're college guys, we're assholes. We're majoring in psychology and engineering, and we're minoring in Budweiser. Come on,
Right.
It's like we were there, So, so I agreed. I said, yeah, unbelievably, I gave my address at their apartment. It was 4 of us roommates. and they came over. I had your book. Questions or anything?
What were they wearing when they came over?
Salkin, he kind of looked like a cartoon version of a weasel kind of a character. He was hunched over and thin and kind of cadaverous. And Woody was a short, stocky, short hair, buzz cut, looked like ex-Marine, wearing a really awful plaid sport coat, string tie, but just as earnest and straightforward as could be. Looked me right in the eye while he talked to me, sat down, and discussed this whole contactee thing that we supposedly both had with these aliens. Like, like we were discussing last night's Chinese takeout. Hey, wasn't that good? Yeah, I liked it. So did you, right? Bah, bah, bah. It was like, it was kind of surreal. I got to tell you, because everything I would say, Woody would sit there and nod in agreement. And if I said something contradictory, he always had an answer why, my perceptions and experiences were different from his. And, I didn't have the heart to bring up the whole Ganymede thing. I just kind of let that slide.
Well, he's classic like improv. Yes, end. Yes, end. Right?
Yeah, that's beautiful, because that's where he was. And the weird thing I kept worrying about is because we had this bookcase full of paperback books right in the living room of the apartment, and the shelves were full of science fiction from the 50s, Valentine paperbacks from the 60s, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, they got to notice. I mean, because I don't know about you, anytime I go into a person's house, if I see any books, I look at the titles and I say, these titles tell me something about who you are, right? By the books you keep or read or whatever.
Or lack thereof.
Well, I could tell you a story about that. The only grown-up people's job I ever had, I worked for in the late 70s, early 80s. I worked for a cable TV company that was part of the pioneer effort to put cable TV in cities. And they had to hire people to go out and knock on doors and tell people, you know what, those 3 channels you're getting, we're going to give you a lot more channels, but you're going to have to pay for your television. Because people looked at you like, excuse me, I'm here for your proctology exam. Yeah, they looked at you like, pay for TV? Are you kidding? Right? There was a totally alien concept. But, I took the gig, and I was working for about 3 weeks. And we were doing row houses in the city. So I was seeing about 10 people a night. And after I'd been there about 3 weeks, I'd probably been through about 100 houses. And I'm at the bar after that night, because we would only work like 6 at night till 8:30, just knock on doors when people were home. And I was telling this buddy of mine, I said, there's something about this job that is bugging me, and I can't figure out. There's something weird about it. And he says, what do you mean? I said, I don't know. I said, I've been talking to all these people. There's some subtext, there's some unconscious thing going on. There's something weird about this job. And you know what happened, Sean? The following week, I knock on this guy's door and I tell him I'm here to talk about cable TV. And he says, oh yeah, come on in. I walk in, and you know what I see in his living room? A bookcase full of books. And I realized, holy shit, I've been in more than 100 houses in the last couple of weeks, and I haven't seen a book. I haven't seen a bookcase. This is the first guy that has books. And that's when it washed over me. I went, oh shit, this is what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't that strange, right? But anyways, getting back to Woody and Harold, yeah, I'm thinking when are they going to notice that I got a bookshelf full of science fiction sitting here right over my shoulder, and you guys are listening to my line of crap here? They never did. And
So,
neither did Keel. And Keel came to my house too.
well, let's hold off on that one yet. So, what kind of questions was the agent asking you?
It's really funny. I could tell by his demeanor and the way he didn't ask me questions is that he really needed me to collaborate what he was doing, because they were supposedly writing a book. And as Hecklefish says, there's always a book. So Salkin was very supportive. And when I would say things that didn't really jive with Woody's thing, he would say, oh, okay, we can work with that. We can work with that. I'm thinking, yeah, I'll bet you can. But the best thing was near the end of the night, he said, Tom, it was really important that we meet with you because we don't meet too many people. We don't have too many contactees like you. And I said, what do you mean? And I knew exactly what he meant, right?
Yeah, college educated, intelligent, well read, right?
Yeah, articulate. I was able to, talk about, describe in detail whatever I wanted to convey to them. And I said, oh, okay, well, no problem. I'm glad I was of a help. And he said, now, would you mind if we told your story to he called it the ufology community. And I said, like an idiot, I'm 20 years old. I said, oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, you can tell whoever you want. Not a good idea. So you read my column, so you know where this is going, right?
I know. I'm just steering you along the path. Because before you get to John Keel, you get somewhere else. Yeah.
Oh.
So what happens next?
Well, I started getting calls from these guys that were part of small saucer. They call themselves. There was a newsletter called Saucer News way back in the 60s and 70s. And it was by a guy named James Mosley. He called me and he said, I know you're bullshit. He called me on it, right? Jim Mosley. Because he was a serious investigator. He believed that there was a saucer thing going on, but he was very skeptical. And he said, look, pal, he says, I know what you're doing here. You're a college kid. You're an asshole. And no, I love him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
He was great. And I said, Jim, between you and me, you nailed me. I'm good. Okay. And he said, I'm going to reveal you. I said, no problem. I said, that's okay. Well, you know what happened? Jim Mosley put out, stuff on the Derenberger, Lanulus, me thing. And people said, no, you're part of what back then they called they didn't call it disinformation, but they said, no, you're part of the conspiracy. You're trying to cover up, the real story. They didn't believe him, which was I couldn't believe it. Now, Sean, this is out there. Oh, God. So, for the next couple of years, there was like a year and a half later, I got married to my first wife. I've only had two, but she was great. We were still good buddies. But part of this, I was getting in it with this UFO stuff for years. She finally said, you got to stop, or I don't want to be around you. Because I was having fun with it. I was saying, oh my God, come on, it's a fun, it's a kick, it's a lark, having fun. But I didn't realize that I was digging myself into a terrible media hole, where
Mhm.
more and more people were, I was getting out into this UFO network that of true believers. And that's part of it, Sean. There's a, it's almost like this, it's not a cult. It's a modern day, it's a religion. These people need to believe that there's a galactic federation out there that's going to save us, from
Mhm.
ourselves. That we are not capable of dealing with the technology and the stuff that we've done. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of on both sides, right? I think there's a spectrum, and you have the true believers on one side, and then you have the extreme skeptics on another. And the
And
truth
they
lies
hate each
somewhere in
other. They
between.
actually hate each other.
And I probably have interviewed both. I can certainly say that for the skeptical side, and I'm sure there may have been at least one slipped in on mine that believes something happens that absolutely didn't. But I have no way of proving one way or the other.
Well,
Right.
the one thing I should clarify, I don't want people to think that did this out of any malicious intent. It initiated as a prank, as a fun college thing, and it just
It's
exponented
snowballed from
itself.
there.
Yeah, it just
Yeah.
did. And I was young enough and dumb enough that I didn't realize what I was letting myself in for.
Yeah.
And it, even back then, before we had internet and all this instantaneous, communication, I got caught up in the network. I was on the Art Bell show. I was on, what's the midnight one in New York? Oh God,
Oh, I have no idea.
Not Paris Lamont. Oh, he was on every night in New York. He had a talk show.
Imus, Don Imus?
No, he was
That's what it's
before
long
that.
before after.
No,
Yeah.
he had a nighttime show. Oh God, he was super popular. But I was on a couple of national radio shows. It was like, and I finally got to the point where I just don't want to do this anymore. And that's when I wrote the article for Omni, and blew the whistle on myself.
And this is 10
It was
years after the story came out, right?
yeah, it's at least 10. It was on Omni magazine. That would you know the history of it?
Yeah, it's like a science fiction magazine. Right.
It was started by the guy that owned Penthouse, Guccione.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody knew it, but Guccione was a big sci-fi fan. And he started a science fiction magazine called Omni. And it did really well for a while. Unfortunately, one of the first editors was a woman called Ellen Datlow. She got canned early on, but the magazine persisted. But I did an article for them about my UFO hoax. It was called The Gullibility Factor. And I
Hmm.
got tons of mail on that. Oh my God. This is back when people sent postcards.
And they were probably pissed. The government told you to say this.
Yes,
You can't say
yes.
this.
At least half the people said, you're a puppet. The government is controlling you. They made you say this. I'm thinking, oh my, are you kidding me? And I know Keel did not believe that. Keel just thought that I was a prankster asshole. You know? Yeah. Keel was upset that I'm talking. I pushed a couple of Keel's hot buttons that you should talk about.
Yeah. Okay. Before we get the Keel, there were still a bunch of people in that interim period that would call you from the UFO community and
Yes.
interview you and ask questions. And then one guy showed up at your apartment.
Oh, he scared the shit out of me.
Yeah, talk about. Well, first of all, what were kind of the questions these people asked you? How often did you get them? And then start into that story.
I would get a call. I mean, I'm not trying to exaggerate. Maybe it wasn't that frequent, maybe once every 2 or 3 months.
Okay.
Sometimes it would just be a call where the guy wanted to interview me on the phone. I had one guy that he wanted to do a phone interview. He wouldn't give me his name, but every 10 seconds I would hear this tap, 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 tap on the phone. And after about 10 minutes, I said, what the fuck? What's with the tap, tap? And he says, oh, that tap my receiver, my phone line, that disrupts their listening to me. I went, oh, great. So you mean you and I were being listened to by the CIA? Oh, yes. Everybody's phone is listened to by the CIA. I'm thinking, oh, God, I got to get off this phone. Right. But no, there was phone calls like that. And then every once in a while, there would be somebody that wanted to actually interview me.
Mm-hmm.
And like an idiot, because I was still a young kid, I would let them, come to my house or my apartment. Eventually, I would say, "Yeah, I'll meet you at the Mayflower Hotel, or whatever." But this one guy came, and he was a true believer, and he believed every word I said. And he said at one point he had this. They would always record me, with their Radio Shack equipment, but he said, you described as markings on the outside of the ship, the egg-shaped craft. Did they look like this? And he pulled out these, drawings, right? And I looked at them and I said, well, yeah, kind of looked like that. And he jumped up and he kind of like did this pirouette dancing around the room. And he goes, oh my God, these drawings are one of our most secret documents, and you described it perfectly. And I'm thinking, hey, pal, I didn't describe shit.
You showed them to me. Right?
You showed them to me. But that was like that told me how fiercely they needed to believe, what they needed to believe. I didn't describe anything, but that's enough for him. And I really felt sorry for the guy, because he was a decent guy. I mean, he's certainly not going to, stalk our daughters walking down an alley or anything. He was just a sad kind of sack. What can I say? Oh,
what
God.
scared you about him?
I feel bad talking about these guys because none of them were bad people. They were sad people. Does that make sense?
What scared you about this guy?
That you mean when he ran to my, after we'd been talking for a while, he stood up and he ran to the picture window and he ripped back the curtains and he said, oh my God, they know of this meeting. And they approve. And he, held his hands out, pointed them up at the sky. And I went, this guy is a nut, and I need to get him out of my apartment. But he was harmless. He was just, true believer. This is all true shit. I even remember his name, which I shouldn't probably say.
Is he still alive?
Probably not. Because I was in my 20s, and that was 40-some years ago. Come on.
Would anybody recognize his name if you said it?
I don't know. I think, believe it or not, I think Harold Salkin is still alive.
Interesting.
I mean, he's got to be a shambling corpse by now, but I saw him on the internet lately.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I guess you probably shouldn't say the guy's name.
No.
How'd you get him out of your apartment?
My room, thank God, one of my roommates came home. And he says, "Hey, what's going on?" He had just came into the apartment, and the guy said, "Oh, I better," and he folded up all his papers and his briefcase and stuff, and said, "I think I need to leave now." He didn't want to deal with, other entities, people.
All right, now I'm going to ask you a crazier question. Was this guy serious, or was this an act? Was this like an intelligence guy came in just to suss you out?
Well, if he was an intelligence guy, he
Pretty damn
was
good.
really good, and he probably should be on some Oscar list because he convinced me that he was a true believer, that he was the guy. I'm going to turn a light on here. I didn't realize that I'm looking like a ghoul. Is that better or no?
Yeah, it's
God, I'm looking like I'm in the crypt. I'm the crypt keeper.
yeah. It suddenly got dark over there, but
I know. Well, you know what? East Coast, it happens, right?
all right. So,
But
but
no, I mean,
did
he did not scare me. And at the time, because I was pretty naive, it never ever occurred to me that he could have been a plant. I mean, who knows? I don't know. But why
did
would
you
they
have
be that
any?
interested in me? I was just a bullshitter.
Well, so I'm just going to come up with a scenario. It could be complete BS. It might be real. Let's say there's something to some of these stories, right? So you would
You
want
mean
to at
the
least,
people you get contacted?
yeah. I don't
I'm
know.
absolutely cool with that. I'm okay with. I will. Let me put it this way. Even though I got involved in this ridiculous hoax, I'm like that poster from Mulder. I want to believe.
Yeah.
I would be happy to know that. I mean, there's a great quote, and I don't know who said it. It's like either we are alone in the universe, or we are one of millions in the universe, and either truth is terrifying, right?
100%.
So I'm
Yeah. So,
okay with that,
so
right?
yeah, if there's something to whatever this is, you would think that people from the government, from intelligence, would interview everybody who claims to have had a contact experience to vet it, right? One way to vet
Right.
it is to send some loon who shows you a bunch of symbols that are have never been seen in any of their intelligence data, and they're like, "Have you seen it?" "Oh yeah, of course." And they're like, "Okay,
Yeah.
this guy, he's not real. Let's move on." Right?
Right.
Right. Right. So
And
again,
that's
I
a
don't know.
vetting. That's a great vetting process, really.
Yeah, 100%.
Which did
100%.
not occur to me at the time.
Well, I mean, you used the same technique on the the radio stations,
Yeah.
right? You said stuff that was obviously bullshit, and Darren Berger's like, yeah, it was just it was the
He
spires
explained it
of
all.
weather. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yep.
maybe that's a fascinating concept or precept that I was victim to that whole thing. But cool. But Keel was a whole different story. I mean,
Oh, we'll get to that. We'll get that. Let's finish this one thread.
okay.
Um, the other thing too is if some of this is real, these are all hypotheticals, and if the intelligence community was engaged in it, they could have also used you unwittingly as a disinformation agent, right? But it doesn't sound like they did. I'm trying to think of
No,
other.
because my story was so dopey. I mean, it was.
Oh, but that works. The more ridiculous you make it, the greater the shame of anybody who tries to come forward with something that's real, right?
And that was one of the interesting psychological aspects of my experiences with these guys. Every time they would ask me to retell the story, I would always add some embellishment to make it sound a little dopier, right? A little more unbelievable. Because I kept waiting for one of these investigators to say, okay, all right, okay, come on, Tom. Really? They came to your restaurant where you worked as a waiter and they ate Earth food? Come on. But nobody ever did. They always, whatever I told them was okay.
Well, sometimes the embellishment you stumble on tends to be like some core secret. So now this is the perfect segue to like, how the heck did John Keel find you? And like, why did he show up at your apartment?
John Keel, apparently, even back then, before the internet and all, he had feelers and what they would call stringers and newspaper people and radio. Oh God, what were they called? Flax. He was connected to all these networks that got him information. He would tell them, he would give them these keywords. Did anything show up on this news show, this radio show, this newspaper? He had a pre-internet information net gathering thing. And a lot of 70s journalists did. They set up these kind of what we call them.
Just intelligence networks.
But yeah, they were not informants, but they were people that would get them what they were looking for. And I got caught in his net somehow. And he called me. And he said, well, no, actually, no, he didn't call. He sent me a postcard and told me to call him. That's how it worked. I called him and he said, I'm going to be investigating something in West Virginia, which I didn't know at the time was Mothman thing. He says, but I'm going to be in your essentially the same neighborhood. I'd like to stop and see you. And I agreed to it, and he came in. And he, right off the bat, Sean, he said, I am not inclined to believe you. I think this is a college prank, right? And this is after I graduated from college, and I was working, oh God, I was working as a mission psychologist at a asylum for the criminally insane. It was not a fun job. It was one of the only real grown-up people's jobs I ever had. Where you had.
By the way, did you deal? This isn't an aside. Did you deal with paranoid schizophrenics at all?
All the time. Oh yeah. I would do the admissions test on them. Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I interviewed another guy, Jerry Marzinski, who worked with paranoid schizophrenics for like 40 some years.
Wow.
There's something else going on there that is not straight up mental health. Like you can dull this
into something. They're listening to a broadcast that we can't get. I believe that.
I mean, his theory is that they're like, whatever they are, they're plagued by these parasitic entities that just get them all energized and then just drain them. But you can call them demons. You can I don't know what you call it, but
it's so sad. I agree. I saw some truly tortured souls. It was
he would start asking them questions, and at one point, after a lot, because he couldn't do it in a normal setting because he would get fired, right? But in prisons, nobody gave a shit, right? So he could ask him all the questions he want, but he would just experiment, like give him things to try to help. So like I can never remember, is it the 23rd Psalm that walk through the valley of the shadow
of death. Yeah.
He said he would just throw things out there like that. Just try to repeat this, because some of them would say it helps, and they would start to get better, right? No explanation as to why, but they would start to get better. But as this would start to happen, one guy came to him and basically said, they have a message for you. He's like,
ooh,
what? And he said, they have a message
Not
for you.
unprompted. He did not ask for this.
Unprompted. So he was a little surprised. He said, okay, well, what's the message? And he said the guy like froze. And then there was like a kind of a different aspect to him in some, I can't explain it, but he just looked at him and he said, I'm trying to remember I won't get the exact words right, but stop messing with our way of life. And then there was like, so he could hear like a crackling.
They're a different entity than us.
Yeah, they're like parasitic entities that, I mean, that's his theory based on experience. Because the other thing would be whenever these voices would come in strongest and they would get really amped up and upset and things like that, after that experience, they would always feel drained. Right? Just completely energetically gone. But I'm trying to think what else he said. There was one other thing.
Were they medicated at the time, or were they not? You don't know that.
So he would.
A lot of my people were medicated.
Yeah. So what the medication does is it doesn't attack the root cause, because I don't think psychiatrists know what the root cause is. But what that would do is it would just deaden all their senses entirely. Mm. So it wasn't really addressing the root cause. It was just deadening their. So no, it wouldn't be, because they would actually get better if they got off the medication. But as soon as their lives started turning around, they were taking courses and things like that, then the voices would come back. The other thing that he said is that people who used like drugs like methamphetamines, like meth, they would start to hear voices when they were amped up. And then if they kept using it, they would permanently hear voices and basically develop. I'm going down a long track here, but in World War II, the Germans.
You're hearing voices constantly. Oh my God.
Yeah, and they're always self-destructive too. And he said people would try to commit suicide, and the voices would just laugh. They would just say, "Yeah, we thought it was stupid, but you're so stupid you did it anyway," right? Like, because they don't want to kill the host, right? They don't want to kill the host. You just want to make the host anyway. If that is true, but in World War II, German soldiers, they would use this, methamphetamine, but it was marketed as something called Pervitin, right? So imagine if you're fueling this invasion into Russia on this drug, that the more that you use it, the more likely you develop similar symptoms to schizophrenics, right? It would drive you crazy. It would make you into like you'd be criminally insane, be murdering people and things like that. So if you take this thesis and kind of push it out, right, it's horrifying. Like the implications are horrifying. Anyway, I didn't mean to take us all the way there, but since you mentioned you worked with these patients, it sounds like he's not far off.
Yeah. I worked there for like 3.5 years, and it was terrifying in a lot of ways, because having been a very grounded, well-adjusted guy, I had no idea that there was people that existed on that plane of unreality. It's like,
well, are you familiar with Gary Nolan, Dr. Gary Nolan at Stanford?
Is he the guy that did the original experiments with punishing people? No,
you're thinking Stanley Milgram.
That's Milgram. That's the Milgram stuff. What was Nolan's thing?
So he's done work with, I think, U.S. Navy and CIA. He's looking at Havana syndrome, looking at brain scans.
Is more recent. Oh, okay. Okay, sorry.
So now he's looking at people on different spectrums. So he's looking at people with autism, or not neurological disorders, but on the autistic spectrum on one hand, and then he's also looking at schizophrenics on the other side of the spectrum. And what they're finding is that both have more of these striations. I don't think I don't think it's scarring, but a lot more activity in this part of the brain called the caudate putamen. Okay, so again, you're probably familiar with remote viewing and stuff like that, which is like Stanford
Sure.
Research Institute.
Sure.
Same thing with remote viewers. People with, allegedly have developed extrasensory perceptive skills, right? They have way more striations in the caudate putamen, but so do schizophrenics. So
who are the schizophrenics perceiving a reality that's different from the remote viewer's reality, or are they tapping into the same?
I just think they're tapping into modes of perception that the rest of us don't have. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think everybody has some degree of remote viewing ability if they just attempt it. But I think the schizophrenics.
You remember Huxley's Doors of Perception, right? Which
No.
I thought was
I have not read that.
Oh, it's a fascinating theory, really. And the rock group, the Doors, is named after the book, Doors of Perception. And Huxley's thing, which has never really been examined or proven.
Is this the same Aldous Huxley of Brave New World, that one, or is it his father?
It is the father.
Okay.
But his thing was that we only perceive what we need to survive.
To survive.
Yeah. That there's a lot more going on in reality that we've learned to screen out because we don't need it. And that when you take a hallucinatory drug, that opens the doors of perception so that you see what's really there, not what you've gotten rid of because you didn't need it.
Well, like even just like basic science, like right behind you, like all over you, all around you and through you, you have Wi-Fi signals bouncing through the room right now, right? You don't see that.
We're getting whacked like a dead porcupine.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so anyway, I took us on a way. Okay, so we were with John Keel.
I hope your audience enjoyed it.
No, they will. But I need to talk less. You need to talk more. They're going to be like, I'm going to get a dozen comments about, the host needs to stop talking. You'd be amazed at how much editorial control Joe Sixpack thinks he has. But yeah, by the way, Joe Sixpack, I have all the editorial control. Yeah. Anyway. But to most of my audience, I love you. You've been here for a while, but there's always that one guy, and he'll just end up pissing into the abyss. But John Keel. So I don't know. How did we end up talking about your experience at
an asylum?
Yeah, no, but there was a reason for it. There's a good reason for it. Where does that tie into the story?
I've lost the thread. I hate to tell you.
All right. Well, John Keel. You're talking to John Keel on the phone. He thinks you're full of it.
Yeah.
But he's gonna come in. He wants to come visit you just to vet it anyway, just to make sure.
Yeah, he wants to he wants to shut the door because he didn't believe Woody for a heartbeat. He thought Denberger's story was just silly. And that
now, where is this in the timeline? Where is this in the timeline, in the 10-year timeline?
Probably, well, the original stuff started in 1967. So this is probably 1975 when he finally contacted me. And this is when he was researching the Mothman stuff. So, yeah, he comes to see me. And right up front, he says, look, I think, you were a college prankster. I don't believe a word what you said, but I need to get this on record, right? And I said, hey, John, that's fine. No problem, right? Because I still hadn't come clean at that point. And I retold my story.
Well, by the way, this is almost like a challenge, right? If you can fool the great John Keel.
Because he had a very good reputation. He was
Right.
called a ufologist. He'd written books. He gave lectures. he was before Discovery Channel, History Channel, all that, but people respected him because he was an honest journalist. He really was, and he was not a true believer. So he came by and we had a long talk, and I'm telling him the story, and he's nodding like, yeah, the spaceship landed on the highway, and you're driving, you had to stop, and silver suit, the whole thing, right? And then I said, yeah, all that was okay. But they contacted me again. I was working as a waiter in a Marriott restaurant called a Hot Shop. And I said, and these guys showed up. And they were wearing black overcoats and hats, and they requested to sit at my table. And
well, right before you said that,
what?
Right before that, you were winding down the discussion, and he asked you the one question. He asked you one last, and where is he at that point before he asked you the one last question? What's your assessment of what he thinks at that moment before the last question?
I was pretty sure he thought I was full of crap. You know what I mean?
Okay, and then what?
I thought I need to throw out another
zinger,
bit of chum here. I have to see what else he might go for.
Okay, so what was his last question?
His last question was, did they say anything that you remember? And that was the last thing they said to you. That's what it was. And
that you haven't told anybody, or something like that.
Yeah.
Or is there something? Is there something you haven't told me that you've never told anybody? Correct.
And I said yes. They said that we will see you in time. And he flipped out. He said, "They said they'll see you in time." And I said, "Yeah, it was like maybe I'll see you sometime." No, I don't think it was that. I think it was I'll see you in time. And he seized on that, right?
Oh boy.
And he said, okay, I need to know more. And that's when I said, well, did contact me later. What? And I said, yeah, I was a waiter. They came to my restaurant, and he says, they eat Earth food? I said, well, yeah, we don't call it Earth food on the menu, but yeah, it's Earth food. And then I said, they asked me, I went off the board on this. I said, yeah, they asked me if they want to take one last ride their ship. And he says, go on. And I said, so I got in their car. This is the part that weirded him out. And I said, and their car, it was a 1950, at that point, 57 Packard. Nobody knows what a Packard is anymore. I said, but it had, the engine ran beautifully. It was clean. It was like a new car. And he said, and he just nodded, right? And he's putting all this together. And then I said, yeah. And then they took me to the ship, and they were wearing, black overcoats and hats. And he said, you're describing something that nobody makes this information available. And you're telling me stuff that is making me reconsider your story. And Sean, I was just sailing frisbees out there. It was like, I want to grow up and be a science fiction writer. I'm trying whatever is out there. And I touched some buttons. The Men in Black thing, I had no idea that was a phenomenon that he had noticed. And the old cars that seemed new, that part was in his time thing, where they would take artifacts from our time period, and when they would bring them back, because of the time distillation effect, they still were pristine. They were still new. They were still Apparently, I pushed buttons I didn't realize I was pushing.
Which leads
crazy?
to the next question.
But he bought.
Where do those?
That's when he said, maybe this guy's got some shit going on here, right?
Now, what was the line again? We'll see you in time.
I'll see you in time.
When's the next time you heard that line?
That's what showed up in the movie Mothman Prophecies.
So explain that. You're sitting down with your son and you were watching this movie.
This is years later. This is 15, 20 years later. And we're watching this movie, the Mothman Prophecies. And there's a scene where Richard Gere's in his hotel room and he gets a phone call through his motel phone. And the voice says, "Hello, we will see you in time."
Miracle cannot be found by looking. You will see her in time.
And I like flipped out, and my son is like, "Dad, what's the matter?" And I said, "Holy shit!" I told that guy, I told John Keel that line 25 years ago. It was like that John Keel story. He incorporated my silliness into his Weltanschauung, his worldview, his understanding of the mystery, so to speak. When it showed up in the movie, I went, "Oh my God."
Now, when did he find out?
I told my son David, I said, your dad is a mutant.
When did he find out you were full of it? From the Omni article or before?
Yeah, from the Omni article. And that really upset him. And I would go to science fiction conventions back then, to be on panels and sell books and stuff. And he would show up at those things to try to find me. So that was I did not want to deal with John.
What was he going to do when he found you?
I don't know. I don't know. And it's one of those things I probably don't want to know. He probably wanted to have a confrontation,
What was the aftermath? So you publish it in Omni, or it's published in Omni. What was the aftermath of that article? I mean, I'm sure half the UFO community said,
They said that I was a puppet, that I had been forced to do that to supposedly discredit the truth of the whole thing. And that they didn't believe it. And other people said, "I knew it was bullshit from the start." There was both sides of it.
Is there anybody out there who still thinks it's true?
No, I don't think so. Unless I haven't seen AJ's thing. I don't think he buys it,
Yeah, I sent it to you already. So after
but
this,
I don't think AJ thought Darren Berger was for real.
No, I don't think he did either. But he gave it a fair.
Okay.
A fair swing, I guess.
I'll go look at it. It's cool. I mean, my kids are all Wi-Fi fans. If I tell them, "Hey, Dad was on Wi-Fi," they're gonna love it. But Dad's a weird guy. What can I tell you?
So any lessons learned?
Huh?
Any lessons learned? Any cautionary tales that you want to tell folks?
With that, it's be careful what you wish for, basically. I had no idea that I was creating this cultural monster. I thought I was just having fun, exposing a poor guy that either consciously wanted to hoax people or sadly believed what he was saying. But I wasn't trying to be, there was no malice in it. I was just a young asshole minoring in Budweiser, like I said. It's like, I didn't mean to do any of this stuff, but you got to be careful because there's a thing called cause and effect, right?
Yeah, and it can run away from you, which it did in this case.
And it did, and it absolutely did. Wow, crazy story, huh?
So, Tom, is there anything else that you want to tell me? Things that you haven't told anybody else?
Okay, well, that's certainly a penetrating question, as they say.
Like how people
Yeah.
can find you and buy your work?
Oh, you're talking. You mean, have you read anything interesting lately?
Yeah,
No,
well, let's answer the first
I,
question. Answer the first question, and then we'll talk about we'll hit the second one right after you answer the
well,
first one.
I have a collection of essays and columns that I wrote for many, many years called the Mothers and Fathers Italian Association. That was the name of the column, and I collected the
Which is
first
like
50
the acronym Mafia, basically.
ex
But
mafia, right? And I
yeah.
collected them together, and it won a Bram Stoker Award for best nonfiction because it was all about publishing and writing and the genres and stuff. So that's out there. But I'm doing a Substack where I'm publishing the 50 plus columns since that since I published that book. And if people want to go to Substack and subscribe to me, I would be happy about that. And I just collected I've done five collections of my short fiction over the years. And I just finished putting together my final collection, 26 stories called Memos from the Abyss. And I need people to buy that.
And then they can find that on. Will they be able to find that on Amazon? Is it up yet?
Not yet. Not yet. We will officially publish it on the website for Borderlands Press, and then it'll be on Amazon later. Yeah. But it has to hit the pub date first, you know.
All right. Well, the link to your Substack, and do you have a website people can?
Yes, it's www.borderlandspress.com, just like the
Okay.
house on the borderlands. No.
Okay, that'll be below. Now, the other question: is
Yeah.
there anything that you haven't said that you've never told anyone?
That is a very, very scary question. I guess the most amazing, the thing I haven't really told anybody.
By the
before-
way, that a similar variation to that question was asked by a DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency psychologist to David Morehouse. David, before he was admitted into the remote viewing program.
He's a reviewer, right? Exactly. He's like Ingo Swan.
Yeah,
You know,
100%.
Ingo Swan. Yeah.
Yeah, but that a similar question, and it made him nervous because he had a metaphysical experience in Baton El Ghul, which was the Valley of the Jinn. It's called in Jordan. He was training there as a ranger company commander.
Yeah.
And he didn't tell anybody about that experience, about kind of what the kind of vision he had or whatever, until that psychologist asked that question. And he's just like,
he
all right.
answered it.
And he's because he felt guilty. He felt guilty. He's like, oh boy, this guy must know something. And then that's how he was considered for the program. They said, well, why don't you read some of these files and tell us what you think? So,
well, what I've never really told anybody that there's something that I really would want to do, and I'm not going to be able to do it, but I'd love to time travel back and see the dinosaurs. I am fascinated by those motherfuckers. They dominated the earth for 100 million years.
so if you believe remote viewing works, you can do that.
I would love to do it.
Not physically, but you can.
I want to see them. That's what I want to do. Yeah. I've never told anybody. That's my secret desire. I'd love to see if they have feathers or not. And I don't believe they're reptiles. I believe they're warm-blooded. And I believe that birds are modern dinosaurs. There you go.
Well, I mean, what chickens are like related to Tyrannosaurus Rex, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people
So-
don't get that, but I see it. It's pretty obvious.
Any final words for the audience?
I hope you enjoyed meeting me and come on back for more because I ain't done yet.
All right, brother. It was an absolute pleasure. I think the audience is going to love it.
Oh my God. A lot of fun. Sean,
right.
thank you.
Yep. Talk soon, Tom.
All right.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of a expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's 2 options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site, and there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much and keep watching. I really appreciate it.